I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's the author of the novel In the Sunrise, no other than Mr. Scott Hoffman.
Well, thank you, Daniel. I wrote Earn Sunrise. I'm a programmer by day. Actually, now lately I've been more in sales, and um, and I'm working on writing a few other books. But have wife, kids, family, small hobby farm. Like to go camping. Like to hike. Like to do a lot of things. I write about in the or that come up in the story Earn the Sunrise, and I like to read. So
Yes, so writing is your passion.
it's one of them. One of many. But yeah, I like to. You know, I like to write code too. I like to use technology to help people, help business needs. But
So, so what is the big difference of being a programmer or being a writing of a novel?
well, the big difference is, of course, that you don't have as many rules you need to follow. They're not as strict. They're more loose when you're writing. You have to make something that's interesting for the reader when you write, and when you program, you have to come up with a set of instructions that make a computer do what it's supposed to do.
Yes. So what are your long-term and short-term goal in writing?
So, long-term goals is I want to write stories that people are going to enjoy, um, but that also that stories that um, oh I like adventure. I like action, thriller, adventure. I like having characters that work together. I've kind of been. I haven't really liked a lot of the ways that many characters are. They're just. It just seems like there's a lot of um, a lot of tropes that I've seen in TV and movies over the past 20 years. I try to avoid. I try to, I guess, counter. And I like making heroes that are heroic, uh, male or female, and then I like making people who work together. And I like making villains that are particularly bad but believable. So I'd say that that's pretty high level. But the other thing I like to do is I like to do contemporary stories or stories that I would say um, don't don't fall into the category of fantasy. I do like science fiction, so some of my stories might go into that. There might be some fantasy aspects of it, but it would be probably more. I would say probably more science fiction is what I would probably might move into. But that's what I'm thinking of doing.
So are you the writer that you plan first before you go depth into your story?
Um, I outline everything first, so I try and sit down and think about where I want to go, what kind of an outcome I want to see, what's going to happen along the way, what are the tension. I try and I create the different characters either on paper in my mind or both. What their motivations are, what they look like, what weapons they use, whatever it is, where their background is, what motivates them, and uh, and then I make all of that, and then I start writing, and usually I throw about a third of that out, and I just make it up as I go along. But it's still well within the outline. But I guess I do. I'm a little bit of both. What do they say? A gardener and I forgot the other term, but I do
Architect,
a what?
architect, architect.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I do a little bit of both. I start off architecting and then I do a bunch of gardening.
Wow. Sounds interesting, Mr. Scott. So before we go on, let's do the recap of the book that we talked about on our last episode. Uh, Earn the Sunrise.
Oh, sure. So, Erin the Sunrise is a young adult story. It's about a girl who experiences loss, and she's challenged to deal with threats. She learns to fight and defend herself. Uh, and then another one is a boy who kind of comes from a different background. He has a lot of problems, and he ends up being in a similar place that the girl is, where he's expected to change his life, his thought process, adopt more of a disciplined approach to dealing with life. A lot of it had to do with fighting as well, learning Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, Krav Maga, defensive techniques, and they both end up meeting one another and go on. I would just say an adventure, a couple adventures that they. Most of it has to do with just dealing with things that crop up in their lives, and there's a little bit of romance, and that's basically it. I don't want to give away any more on the story, but just keep in mind that it is going to be a lot of action adventure. It takes place in the Minnesota wilderness, or the Boundary Waters, mostly, and yeah. So there you go. It should be. Well, the only other thing I can say is it's probably unlike any other action thriller you've ever read. So I do pride myself on coming up with, I think, some original ideas. So I'll just put that out there as well.
Yes. So, Earn the Sunrise. Is there a sequel or prequel?
I'm working on a sequel to it. So there right now the story does continue, and there will be. I don't want to give away too much, but I was basing it. The story was going to be somewhat related to um, oh the Nigerian high school girls that were kidnapped in 2014, I think it was, with and in Chibok, Nigeria. And so I'm loosely basing the story around a rescue for some of those girls. I think that they had in real life, they went through an incredibly horrendous experience, and I'm just surprised there isn't more written about them. they, it was just an amazing story, um, and so anyway, I'm going to inject that story into the Olive and Arrow, which is the Earn the Sunrise series, characters, and how they come up with saving a fictional character. One of the girls I came up with a fictional version of her, and so that clearly the whole book is a work of fiction, but it's just going to be based on that real life incident.
So, if you have the second option for the title of the book, which one do you have it? Do you have a second option?
Um. So when you say, you mean like a title for it, or?
Yes. I'll say
Oh,
Earn the Sunrise or Earn the Sunset.
so I was thinking. All right, so in the next title, I would probably. I haven't figured out a title yet. But I was thinking of having the. I definitely want to have the name Sambisa in it, because that's the name of the forest in Nigeria where Boko Haram hides out in, and that's where a large part of the story is going to take place. I think that's going to tell readers that may not be familiar with the story what it's going to cover. So maybe something like Sambisa Sunrise, so that way it's tied it back to the Earn the Sunrise. But I don't know. I haven't. I wanted to. I need to finish writing it in order to make sure. I can't think of a better title, right? I mean, there might be something that's said or something that comes up, or I might make a great literary reference that I like better. But at this point, that I think that's what I'm leaning toward, is having Sambisa in the title.
Yes. So, Mr. Scott, let's talk about your books that you read. So, which books that we're gonna talk about today?
So I've read Dylan West. I've read two of his books. One was the Scribe's Descent, and then the other one was that's in the same world, but yet it's more of a, I would call it a middle grade book. It's the
Emancipation.
yeah, I'm sorry, emulsifation. I'm sorry. I keep yeah, and I don't mean to yeah. So but the so I read both books, and Scribes Descent is a young adult science fiction, fantasy. I put it in the category of both. There's science fiction in it and some fantasy, and then of course the other one is also a book that it takes place in the same world. It's more middle grade, and so as a result of that, it's not as it's a shorter book, a little faster moving, and it's designed for the younger reader.
Yes. So, Scribe Descent. How did you like it?
So in Scribe's Descent, I thoroughly enjoyed the story. It's what I love about a couple things. I mean, first of all, it's a young adult fantasy science fiction novel that doesn't have a bunch of elves and orcs and everything else in it that it seems like is very common these days. It's become a trope almost that if you're doing fantasy, it's going to have it's going to be either what a vampires, or it went from vampires and now it's more like the orcs and the elves and dwarves, and it doesn't have any of that. It's a completely new and different world. So the thing is that I think that's a very refreshing difference. Um, the other thing that I enjoyed about it was that the characters were they work together a lot. I mean, in general, I like that. He has also worked out an entire world, um, or world building, I guess, if you will, that ties it all together. So you can tell that there's a lot going on. Or he's worked out things like the cultural ceremonies that they perform. Um, he's worked out a language. Um, they have catchphrases. There's different religions that these people and these different cultures have, and so that affects how they deal with one another. So it's all very um, intellectually compelling in terms of how these people deal with one another. It's very interesting. And then, of course, there's a major science fiction aspect to it. These cultures have advancements that are, I would say, they're mostly more advanced than our current, where we're at. So you're seeing a lot of things that go beyond um, what we see in our society.
So, if you want to describe Mr. Dylan West writing, what is it?
So that's tough to say. I can't think of an author that he imitates per se, other than, I mean, I know this only from hearing his interview and talking to him, but he's definitely influenced by Brendan Sanderson. I would say that in Sanderson's novels, there's an incredible. I mean, in a similar way, Sanderson does a lot of world building and covering a lot of the different aspects. How these people and in these different cultures that live together in the same territory, how they interact with one another, what some of their cultural nuances are. And so Dylan does that. He in Scribes Descent, he has a lot of that. So I'd say that off the top of my head, that's really the author I was thinking of, and it's probably true just because I know that Dylan is a big Sanderson fan as well.
Yes, definitely. So, before we go on, Mr. Scott, I want to shout out to the people listening in China. Oh, thank you so much, China, for listening to this podcast. In Yunnan, I got 50%, and Liaoning at 50%. Thank you, China, for supporting this podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Scott Hoffman. Subscribe to send. What do you think the best highlight?
So the thing I kind of like about it is my favorite part was toward the end. It got more and more compelling as the story went on. You begin to see Mallory, who's the main character, begin to experience a lot more challenges, and then she steps up to that. You the other thing is you see her act in ways that are consistent with her age, with her um, mental well-being. There's a lot of danger that she goes through, challenges she rises to, dangerous situations she's put in. So it makes the story move a lot faster at that point. So I that's probably my favorite part of the story is the latter part.
So, what do you think Mr. Dylan West put in Scribe Descent that readers glued to it?
What's in it that readers are glued to it, or what would make them like this novel?
Yes.
Um, so I would say that he does a great job of escalating the story and making it so that well, you have characters that you begin to care about. The main character is very likable, and you begin to want to see her succeed, and then you begin to see her go through some very difficult challenges. So that builds up in it. I think that's what people are going to like. I think the other thing about it is that it's unlike any other story I believe that's out there. I mean, I'm not a, I would say I'm probably a casual reader in the um, young adult science fiction fantasy genre. Yeah, I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with what's out there. My kids all read it. My wife reads it, and I've read a number of stories. I've read a lot of Sanderson and some of the other young adult stories that they read, but I don't recall reading anything that is like this story. So it's very different. The world is a very different world, and it's complicated and um, detailed enough to make it so that you're not gonna as a reader, I think you're going to find it to be interesting just from that alone. So the world is interesting. They have some in the same way that I suppose in a Sanderson novel you care about the characters, but you care about the world as well. He definitely puts a lot of time into it, and it's clear that Dylan has put his time into developing that as well, to developing the world that they're in. I mean, as I recall from one of the interviews, I think the interview you did with him, he claims to have written 5 books on this. So, I mean, he's spent what is it? I don't know how many years doing it. He's basically written an entire series, and all at once. And so now now that he's done that, he has a very clear uh, way of seeing where everything's going or what they can do, and he's able to write stories that are consistent with his canon, make it so that these characters act in a way that you would expect, and ultimately there's he has some kind of end game in mind. That's I know a lot of authors talk about writing they start from the ending and they work backwards. I do that to some extent. I kind of I not quite. I just think of first that comes to mind is I say, all right, I want this circumstance to happen and it to end this way, and then I start to outline and I work back from that. Whereas here with Dylan's work, he's got 5 books worth of that, so he knows he's able to put together a much more grandiose story.
Yes, very well said, Mr. Scott. What do you think the flaws of Scribe's Descent?
the flaws. All right, so I would say that there's a couple things I just thought there was in the beginning. It did. I thought it went a little long into a couple things, and that kind of slowed it down a little. Like, um, just being totally truthful, I thought that like there was well, I don't want to give anyone any spoilers, but there was a ceremony, and it seemed like I think what Dylan was trying to do is show how the different cultures handled death and handled life and some of these bigger, types of situations. And so he went into a lot of the ceremony that just seemed a little long, maybe, because we had a lot of action going on, and then we had that. I think the only other thing I can think of, and I'm honestly, I'm not saying this is I'm just trying to, I guess as a flaw, is it a flaw or is it something that maybe could have been improved? And maybe he's handling it in the next book, but it's just the one thing I was thinking of is that he had another character who was a friend of Mallory, the main character, named Leah, and she plays a major role in the beginning, but then she's not really all that much included in the latter part of the book, and I have a feeling that it's just because the story ended. Clearly, there's another. I mean, the story is going to continue on, and I suspect Leah's going to come back in the next story. But it's just we're introduced to this character, and then and she seemed fairly interesting and a big part of Mallory's life, but then we don't really see much about her, in the latter part of the book. But other than that, I didn't really think there were. I mean, I wouldn't even really call those flaws. Maybe, opportunities to, maybe you could have made it move a little faster and maybe make a, I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of. But again, it's not anything that I was sitting there as I was reading it thinking to myself, this is something that is going to make it so that it's going to doom the story. I mean, you see these same types of literary differences in say, someone like a Sanderson. He will put a lot of time into developing worlds and show you into these different ceremonies and things, and you don't really know when you're reading it why it ties in. Sometimes you'll see characters get introduced and you won't see much about them until the next book. So, but that would be the only thing I could think of.
Yes, so before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, on our third season with Chef Alessandro, one of the executive chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Plus, I have upcoming new podcast this coming June, Comedy 101 with Mr. Mike Lucas, one of the best comedian of all time. So please do check it out this coming June. So, Mr. Scott, you as being an indie author, what are the pros and cons?
Well, I would say the biggest pro is that I can write a story without anybody trying to change the story. I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, and I don't have the time to wait. So if I was to go with a traditional publisher, once I finish the book, it's probably going to be 18 months before it's actually going to get into anybody's hand. Whereas when I finish a book as an indie author, I can, like the way I work is I would go find an editor and have them go through it and then, look for, help me fix up some of the things, grammatical errors or possibly other errors in terms of flow or character development or whatever it may be. The point is, what an editor does, having, a second set of eyes helping you out. and then I make a cover, and then and I do that. I don't have the the talent to do that, so I pay someone to do that, and then I can put it out onto out in in the marketplace within a day after doing that. So the I think that's a huge advantage. So that means what that means in terms of time. If you did it right, you could probably get a book published, say a week or two after you get done writing it, depending on how commission the cover and how you work with your editor. So I think that's a tremendous benefit. Not having if you went with a traditional publisher, you've got they're only going to let you write something that is going to be close to what they think will work, and they're going to um, I guess cull the material based upon their own sensibilities. Unless you're a an established author, then they'd probably give you more autonomy in what you want to write. But if you're a new author, they're going to take it's almost I think it's a paradoxical issue. They brought you on because you came up with a new and fresh and innovative idea, although it's probably similar to something that sold well recently. But then they're going to want you to make it just like that other thing that sold really well just recently. So they're going to keep pushing you in that direction, and as opposed to letting you really um, create material that you want to create. So I think that's the biggest thing is you've got autonomy and speed to market.
Yes. So, what is your aspiring message for those aspiring writers out there to want to publish their story?
So the um, I wrote another book back in 2003, and that was a, a nonfiction book. And at the time I wrote it, I had a lot of other writing opportunities. I didn't really enjoy it. And plus I was working full time, so it wasn't something I was really interested in continuing on with. And around that same time period, I got to thinking, well, it'd be really fun to write a fiction story. And I had some ideas. I never did them because writing nonfiction, and I was writing computer books, so and editing them and writing white papers and things like that. You have to write in a very dry and um, you're writing works that are intended to be reference material, right? So it's there were style guides I had to follow to make the language fit in with the style of the books. In general, it's just very pedantic and dry, and there wasn't a lot of opportunity for creativeness. And but I thought to myself, I just couldn't. I've read other at the time I read another book by an author who had classically done a lot of nonfiction, and then he wrote a novel, and it was very stilted and stiff, and it didn't read well. And I thought that's probably what I would produce. And so I didn't try it until a couple of years ago. So basically I'd spent 20 years thinking about it, not doing anything. So to the aspiring writer, I would say, yeah, go for it and do it. And your first draft is going to be crap, and don't let that stop you. I wrote I wrote Earn the Sunrise, and then I revised it about 13 times. And yeah, it's a lot of work. But again, I'm glad I did it. I'm much better of a writer now because I did it. And I know the next time that I actually when I get the next one, or I'm going to be able to write the next one a lot faster, a lot better. I'm going to be able to draw put more tension in. I think I'll have my characters develop better. I'll have a faster story. So you'll just get better with your craft. So you just got to go out there and do it. I would say that's number one, and then number two, make sure that you study up and read. There's a lot of authors who've written books about how to write books. And I learned a lot by reading those books, by studying other authors. And I would say now don't even go with the. I mean, I think a lot of people I hear they're going to go and they're going to go after the well-known authors who wrote a book about it. But like one of the best books I read was one by James Scott Bell called "How to Write Dazzling Dialogue: The Fastest Way to Improve Any Manuscript." And I don't think he's a particularly famous author, but like Stephen King wrote a book on how to write books, and a lot of people I think would gravitate to that. I don't know that's a bad book. I'm just saying that James Scott Bell's book I think is an excellent book, and I don't think he's that well known of an author. I've read Orson Scott Card's book on how to develop characters, and then of course Brendan Sanderson has a he teaches at Brigham Young University, and he puts all of his creative writing course on YouTube for free. So there's probably about 10 years of classes you could go and watch, and it doesn't even cost you anything. And he would lecture about how to write his stories. Another one I read was what's her name? Cleland. I'm trying to find the book here. I'm afraid I want to cite her, but I can't seem to find it I can't find it quickly here. But anyway, my only point is that there's a lot of material out there. So your first time writing probably isn't going to be that good. Just expect that and study up, and then get some help out there. Read what it takes to write better dialogue, to write a better story, and then hire an editor to help you get even better. I know that Dylan uses other more. There's other options out there where you can read other people's stuff and then build up karma points, and then other people will read your stuff and give you comments, and that's I think I haven't done that, but that's another option if you don't want to spend money. Probably my biggest issue is time. So
do you think that practice make you better in the process?
Oh, absolutely, yes. So what you're going to do is things that I had to teach myself how to start writing, how to start thinking about what the characters would say, but also think about what the reader is going to hear. You want to make something believable, but at the same time, people also want to read about amazing people, right? So if a character is doing something boring like, I don't know, a bunch of accounting, you're not going to sit there and describe it because it's real. No one cares. So you do have to you have to make characters interesting, and you have to focus on the parts that are going to keep your reader interested. You gotta make sure that there's some degree of conflict at all times, and the conflict can mean in different ways. It's just you can't have just something that's going to read without something that's going to keep your reader interested. And I guess thinking about that was something I learned by writing and rewriting, and then reading my writing aloud, or having beta readers give some feedback. And then, so I would say that, definitely the more you write, the better you're going to get. So.
Yes, very well said, Mr. Scott. So, Earn the Sunrise, give us the best highlight.
Oh, the best highlight. I would say that I think there's a few powerful parts in the book. I think one of them is I'm not going to give any spoilers, so I'm going to be purposefully vague, but you definitely have a situation where Avery, the main female protagonist, finally is able to she gets to the point where she threatens one of the main antagonists. That was, I think, a very powerful scene. A lot of people really liked, I didn't really think about this when I wrote it, that this would be the case, but a lot of people really liked Colin's mentor. Colin is a main character, and his mentor is a retired Navy SEAL named Bud Slaughter. And Bud seemed to resonate with a lot of my readers. They really like him. So, you're going to see some scenes that can be pretty graphic with some blood and guts and fighting. So I would just say that I think those are some of the more powerful scenes personally.
Yes. So, Mr. Scott, can you invite our listeners to buy Earn the Sun? Earn the Sunrise.
Yes, yes, I appreciate that. I would say if you can, right now I only publish it through Kindle on Amazon, so you can get the ebook, or if you have Kindle Unlimited, then you can your Kindle subscription already covers it, and so you can read it for without having to spend anything more. It's available as an ebook or as a paperback on Amazon. So if you do a search for Earn the Sunrise, you're sure to find it. Would really appreciate if you go there and check it out.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Scott Hafmann, because if you support him, he will give his best and more books to come.
Right on. Yeah. It's hard to do this when you're, if you don't make any money. It makes it more difficult.
So, Mr. Scott, thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. I appreciate taking the time, and appreciate your listeners listening in, and including the folks in China. Appreciate you listening in. Thanks so much.
Yes. Ni hao ma, China, Mandarin. Welcome, people. See you soon.